3,000 of the world's best athletes will be competing in adidas sportswear at the Beijing 2008 Olympic Games this summer. Incorporated in the adidas apparel and footwear are two key technologies, TechFit PowerWeb and ClimaCool, designed to help athletes achieve their impossible in Beijing.
TechFit has been an ongoing process of learning what's important for our athletes. We started working with Ian Thorpe for the 2000 Olympics for introducing our full body compression for the first time. Then we worked with Kim Collins, working on the first TPU power band suit, which actually led to a world record. And since then, we've been building and developing a knowledge of what's important for our athletes. This has all been leading up to Beijing. We have 3,000 adidas athletes that will be competing at the Games, and many of whom will benefit from the research and development that's gone into TechFit PowerWeb bands.
Every athlete knows that if you can beat fatigue, you can beat the competition. Now research at the University of Calgary has proven it out too.
The main way that fatigue affects an athlete or any of us is actually by decreasing the amount of force that a muscle can produce. So once a muscle is fatigued, it can't produce the maximum amount of force that it can when it's not fatigued. So obviously, if we're interested in an athletic performance, if we can't produce the same force that our muscles are typically generating, then the performance is going to be decreased.
Years of testing and development by the adidas innovation team have gone into making TechFit PowerWeb a significant advancement in sport.
TechFit also incorporates an elastic element inside. This is called a TPU power band. TPU stands for thermal polyurethane, and it actually gives the structure a bit of a structural integrity. It gives it a bit of stiffness inside the garment, and you can have a directional stiffness for the garment. When those bands are stretched, they can actually load elastic energy, and we have the bands crossing over the hip joint. When the hip is flexed, that band is stretched and is loaded with elastic energy. When it's extended during the propulsive phase of movement, you have that burst of elastic energy that can be an added power for the athlete to help them run faster and help them jump higher.
TechFit Power Bands are the key to helping your muscles perform to their full potential.
Well, the power bands are speculated to improve performance by one of two main mechanisms. One of the mechanisms is to actually store and return elastic energy. So you can imagine as they're crossing the joint, when we flex our joint, we're stretching this elastic spring and we're storing energy in it, and then when it returns or when we're taking off again, the energy that's stored in that spring can be returned to the athlete. The second way which it potentially does is it aligns or it positions the muscles in the appropriate position as well. So our muscles have certain characteristics associated with their range of motion and where they operate the best. They have certain characteristics as to how fast they operate, and the force is generated is directly proportional to the speed with which they're contracting. So the way the PowerWeb bands work is they can influence that. They can change the range of motion. So our arm, for example, works best in a middle range of motion. It's very weak at an extended position or very weak in a contracted position. But by putting these elastic bands on that, we can manipulate where the operating range is of these particular muscles.
TechFit para mim é bom porque lembro dos meus primeiros fatos que eu tinha Adidas, eram justos, e quando nós íamos para a competição era só quando nós metíamos esses fatos e sentimos seguros, sentimos fortes. E TechFit vem reforçar essa tecnologia, que é quando nós metemos um fato TechFit e vamos fazer algo ao mais alto nível, sentimos que estamos bem seguros, estamos no nosso melhor, sentimos quase como se fôssemos um robô ou fôssemos bater todos. É isso que é bom. Eu gosto disso da TechFit e por se assentar tão bem e ser confortável ao mesmo tempo.
Ich mag die Kompression sehr und kann dann besser springen und mich drehen. Und von daher habe ich festgestellt, dass meine Trainingszeiten bzw. Wettkampfzeiten viel besser wurden. Ich denke schon, dass es möglich ist, mit dem neuen Badeanzug Weltrekord zu schwimmen. Schon im letzten Jet-Konzept bin ich Weltrekord geschwommen und ich denke, mit dem wird es noch mal eine Nummer schneller gehen.
Results of testing showed TechFit provides an average 5.3% improvement in energy output and a 1.1% faster sprint time over 30 meters. Athletes wearing TechFit also reduced their oxygen consumption by 1.3%, a clear sign that wearing TechFit can also drastically increase endurance.
The TechFit apparel, we found an increase in sprinting performance of about 1%. That's really the difference between being first on the podium or not even making the podium.
Performance doesn't stop with TechFit PowerWeb. In Beijing, if you want to bring home the gold, you have to keep your cool.
Well, we know that in Beijing we will really have hot temperatures when athletes doing their sports over there. And so the idea was, how are we best able to serve the athletes by needs of getting them optimized climate? And we came to the idea that whenever it is possible to guide fresh air around the body to really cool the body in an optimal way, that this is the concept for Beijing.
For each individual sport, there is an optimal temperature to perform it, and that's very much related to how much energy that sport requires. The more energy a sport requires, the more heat is produced, so the lower the environmental temperature will have to be. Within each sport, there is even a big difference between different athletes.
Heat and sweat are the enemy. ClimaCool is the answer.
When I compare how ClimaCool looks now and how it looked before the Athens Olympics, we can see a very strong development based on the scientific results we have made available to Adidas. Before the Athens Olympics, we mainly had heat mapping of the body, so we knew where most of the heat came to the surface. Since Athens, we've now put a lot of effort in measuring the sweat distribution of the body and have now quite an accurate sweat map, so the distribution of the sweat over the different parts of the body. And the ClimaCool generation that we're looking at now has incorporated that in the design, so trying to optimize the heat loss of the person.
Getting cool air into the shoe and around the foot has always been a challenge, but it's one worth perusing.
Well, when we incorporated it into the footwear side of things, we use this kind of really open mesh upper constructions where air is then able to get into the shoe around your foot. And with the additions of holes inside the sole, the air is really going around your foot, getting in on that side of the shoe and getting out at that side of the shoe, and then again cools your foot in an optimal way. Well, you know, whenever you have done sports, you know, whenever doing that in a hot and dry environment, you see that your foot will build up a lot of heat and a lot of sweat. And we have been able to show that with ClimaCool products, we can reduce the amount of heat by 2 degrees, and we can reduce the amount of sweat by 20 to 25%.
Adidas works hard to provide athletes in Beijing and worldwide with the best technology available. And in the spirit of sport, Adidas is continually pushing to reach new levels.
What's coming up next? Actually, you have to ask the athletes, because the athletes will tell us what they need, and together with the material suppliers, the weather conditions in London will be different to those in Beijing. The requirements concerning sustainability will be in the focus for sure. So that is something where you can be guaranteed that there will be our focus over the next development cycle.
From Beijing and beyond, Adidas is proud to be part of the spirit and legacy of the Olympic Games.